to create holistic frameworks and perspectives for the work that she has done. In her research, teaching, and consulting, Dr. Madhuk Ma'am looks for opportunities to translate management practices into theories and vice versa. Now, I would like everyone to kindly help me and ask ma'am to join us in and welcoming the esteemed guest speaker of this intercollegiate webinar on ancient wisdoms for Generation Z graduates. We are all eagerly awaiting for you, ma'am, to hear and all the fundamentals of the Generation Z. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rushita. That was amazing. Nice to listen to my own introduction. That's great. And I must say you have a very graceful presence. And I'm very, very happy to be here. And I said to Dr. Rupal as well that I'm really looking forward to interacting with all of you. My favorite generation so far is the ones who are between 18 and 25. And I just love interacting with them. I've been a teacher for more than half of my working life. And the rest of the life I've been doing other professional stuff. So the teacher in me never died, even when I left the teaching profession, I'm still, a teacher somewhere deep inside. So I'm very happy to be here today. And when Dr. Rupal called me and said, let's talk about Chanakya Niti, I said, why just Chanakya Niti? Let's give them a larger canvas and let's talk about all the epics. Chanakya Niti is based upon one epic called the Arthashastra. But I'm going to introduce you today to 4 different epics, and it's going to be just a brief introduction, but I do hope it will be meaningful for you and that you will learn something at the end of the day, and you'll be excited and interested in reading more and in your own journey to discovering a little bit more about what India has to offer and the beautiful things that our country is all about, So it's about epic fundas, fundas for life. Actually, I would say that's why I said they're of epic proportions. They're huge and huge for us. Whatever the ancient wisdom has to share with us. Before I begin, I have a disclaimer, and you would have seen that I'm an HR professional. I'm an independent consultant. I'm a retired teacher. And I do lots of things. I am everything, but I'm not a scholar, a Sanskrit scholar, or a scholar in the field of studying Ramayana, Mahabharata. I am not a scholar. But by all means, I have, over the years, just because of being around longer than you, I have had many, many moments of insight from reading of the epics, watching of the serials, and, from discussions in gatherings. And I just thought I'll put together some of that in the form of a little story for you today. And so that's the disclaimer. I would love to know if any of you have read the original Mahabharata. You're likely to say no. If there is anyone who's read the original Mahabharata, that's amazing. If any of you has read the original Sanskrit version of the Ramayana written by Valmiki, most likely no. If any of you have read a book on the Mahabharata translated into English or the Ramayana or the Arthashastra, likely to be no. And if you ask me, I am also a product of modern India. I'm a product of living in big cities like Mumbai and Delhi. And I also have not read the original versions of Mahabharata and Ramayana and Arthashastra. However, I have watched all the TV serials that came. I have read a little bit. I've attended a few lectures. And I've gained my own knowledge, whatever came to me. Human beings are what I call eclectic people. You are an eclectic person. Each one of you is an eclectic person. It means what? It means that I live my life and I learn a lot of lessons, and whatever makes sense to me, I internalize it and make it my own learning. So we learn not from one place or from one source, we learn from many sources, many places. So that makes us eclectic. We create our own individual philosophies in life. our own personal philosophies in life, our personal outlook in life. So also, each one of you has the potential to and already has created some philosophy in life that makes sense to you and is serving your purpose now. And as you go along, you'll keep adding more and more things to it. So I wish you luck in your journey. But that was my disclaimer. I've learned a lot in my life, and I'm just presenting you some things. I'm not a scholar by any means. Okay, it all began with something called the Vishnu Puran. It began with something called the Vishnu Puran, which is one of the most ancient scriptures that's written. And it talks about the creation of the earth and the world and the universe as we know it. And they say that Vishnu, the Lord Vishnu, and this is centuries and millennia ago, that he was the supreme god. Of course, there's Brahma, Vishnu, Mahesh, and there's a Brahman over that. There are three major gods, but he was one of the ones who interacted most with the human people. And he came down to earth every time, taking up a form, every time there was a need, and there was a need for establishing order and, right over wrong. He came down. So he has 10 different avatars, starting with Matsya, which is the fish, and then the turtle, which you can see here. Then he came down as a boar, a wild boar, when he saved the earth from drowning. And then he was Narasimha, which was like half man and half lion, and he came to kill some of the demons that were terrorizing the earth. And then he was Vaman, which is a dwarf kind of a creature. And there was Lord Ram from the Ramayana. He came down he was an incarnation of Vishnu. Then Krishna, Lord Krishna was another incarnation of Vishnu. And Gautam Buddha, here there is a little dispute whether it was Gautam Buddha or it was Vinoba, but it is widely assumed that it was Gautam Buddha, who was also an avatar of the Lord Vishnu. So 9 avatars the world has seen. And the 10th avatar, which is Kalki, is yet to come. And they say that Kalki will bring an end to the world as we know it, so that the cycle can begin again. What is this cycle of existence? Let me introduce you to a little bit on that. There is a lot of dispute as to how many years ago this was. Different scholars have different opinions. So that's why I'm not putting that factual data for you, because no one version is right. But let's just know for ourselves that the world began roughly 1 million years ago, and it was called the Sat Yuga. And during the Sat Yuga, it was all good that prevailed, all good people, and people were very noble and honest. You didn't have to close your doors. There would be no robbers, no thieves, and people were living lives of integrity and character. There were 2 kinds of loks or places where people lived. One was called the Dev Lok, which is the, where the Devtas and the gods lived. And one was called the Asur Lok, which is where the evil people lived, or the Asurs lived, which were not very good. But they were 2 separate worlds, so to say. And this Sat Yuga was one of the longest yugs. Yug say it was one of the longest yugs that existed. Then came the Treth Yuga. Now, what does the word Treth mean? Treth means 3/4. It means 3/4. And Treth Yuga means 3/4. So 3/4 of good and 1/4 of evil. Literally, that's what it means. So in the Treth Yuga, there was 1/4 of evil people around, but largely the world was very good, and people were still very good. This is the era in which the Ramayana was written. And Lord Ram fought the battle with evil, the good over evil, and good always wins over evil during the Treth Yuga, because it's 3/4 is good and 1/4 is evil. Then comes the Dwapar Yuga. Dwapar literally means half, twice, half, Dwapar, 2 parts, and it means there was half good and half evil. And this was the era in which Mahabharata was written. There were good and bad equally there, but good and bad were in your own family. In Treta, good and bad were other people. I was good, or other people were bad, or other people. So there were different people and different. In Satyug, good and bad people lived separate worlds altogether. They hardly interacted. They did, of course, on many occasions, but in Dwapar Yug, good and bad came in the same family. So the same family became half good and half bad, good and evil. So in Dwapar, it was half and half. Around 4,000 to 3 to 4,000 years ago, what has begun is called the Kal Yug, or the Kali Yug, where the world is 3/4 bad and only 1/4 good. Now, I don't want you to get depressed about that. There is a lot of interesting things that, challenges that it poses for us to be good and to continue to fight evil. And so in the Kali Yug, this is what, is and the Kali Yug was when, in the beginning of Kali Yug was when Gautam Buddha took birth, because he knew that the world is going to be deteriorating as we go forward. So Gautam Buddha came on this planet, and Lord Vishnu came in the form of Gautam Buddha, heralding the Kali Yug, so that we could live by his lessons and we could live by what he taught us. So this is a little bit of a background, and let me go forward. So the first story I want to tell you, the first epic I want to tell you, is about Samudra Manthan. And this happened, if you go in the back, during the Satyug. During the Satyug, when things were all good. And something called Samudra Manthan happened. And Samudra Manthan was when the gods, the Devas, and the Asuras, who were the evil people, they lived in Devlok and Asurlok. They lived in separate worlds, but they used to constantly have battles and skirmishes. And they knew that there is something called Amrit, or which makes you immortal. And it is lying at the bottom of the ocean. And they learned about this simultaneously, and they both started a battle to fight for the Amrit. And then Lord Vishnu advised them, you don't need to fight, because you have to churn the ocean. Samudra ko manthan karna hai. You have to churn the ocean so that you can access the Amrit. You cannot access the Amrit without that. And you cannot churn the ocean unless there are two opposing forces. So all the Asuras on one side, you will see them over here, and all the Devtas on the other side, they took this big mountain and they churned the ocean. And this person you see in the center over here is Lord Vishnu. He was in the turtle avatar. The turtle, he was in the form of a turtle. You can see here his face, half turtle and half Vishnu. And he took the turtle avatar at this stage. He was at the bottom of the mountain, which was perched on the mountain was perched on his back, and the Samudra Manthan happened. Now, when the Samudra Manthan happened, for me, it was very interesting when I learned about Samudra Manthan, because as a psychologist and as a teacher, and even all of you have teachers, one of the big things we do is we ask our students to start questioning things. Don't just manage and learn by heart whatever you have to study. Question what you're studying, question the validity of what you're doing, and ask the questions. So when we ask questions, there's a little Samudra Manthan that happens in our mind, a little churning. There's a Samudra here. So the big story gets repeated here. And in the churning, every time we face a challenge, now you're going to do an internship, you're going to work, you're going to get on a train, you're going to, have some party also. The little churning that happens in your mind. How do I decide? What am I supposed to do? Whom do I call for my party? And what do I create for my menu? And all that kind of stuff. Those questions create a churning in your mind. And in the churning, some good things come and some bad things come. All the good thoughts will come to you and all the bad thoughts will come to you. So that, and at the end of the day, the Amrit will come. Now, according to the Samudra Manthan, the churning first Please mute yourself. Shreyansh Modi, please mute yourself. Thank you so much, dear. You can mute yourself, Shreyansh. All right. So when you churn yourself, it was very interesting to note first only the wish comes, the poison. It comes out of the ocean. Anytime you want to take a decision, what do I do? Do I do maths? Do I do science? Do I do arts? Do I do humanities? What do I do? What the way I answer a question? Initially, first the wish will come, the poisonous, the negative thinking will come. And it's only when the wish comes out fully, and in the Samudra Manthan, the wish came out first, and it was so toxic and so poisonous, they didn't know what to do with that poison, because if they allowed it to fall on the earth would be finished. So Lord Shiva comes here, and you will see here, he's Lord Shiva, and he consumes the wish. And he says, I will nullify the wish. But he was unconscious for 6 or 7 days, and the poison was going down his throat. And then his wife Parvati comes and holds his throat over here, and the wish does not go below the throat. So the wish remains over here as poison, and that's why Shiva is often called Neelkant, because Kant means throat, and Neel means because he turned blue because of that poison. So often Shiva is colored blue color, and is called Neelkant is one of his names, and the Neelkant is because his throat is blue. So the wish comes out first, and at the end of it, I don't know how many days and years, it took years and years of churning. At the end of that churning comes the Amrit. All good things come. Elephants, apsaras, and lots of things, rubies, diamonds, gems. There's a whole description in the epics of that. At the end of it, the Amrit comes. And when the Amrit comes, there's a chase. That's when the Asuras wanted and the Devtas wanted, both of them wanted, but they can't both have it, because whosoever consumes that Amrit is going to last for the rest of his life. He will be immortal, and he will be supremely powerful, that person who consumes that Amrit. So when the Amrit comes out, Lord Vishnu was present. He takes charge of it, and he says, I'm going to distribute. And he takes a good decision. He said, I'm going to distribute it amongst the Devtas. The Asuras are very angry and upset because they wanted it, but they didn't have any say in the matter. So it was given to all the Devtas. That's why the gods are permanently there. And Asuras are able to be conquered and vanquished. All the negative thoughts in your mind, you can conquer and vanquish. And once you put a positive thought in your mind, it will never die. It will never die. It will be immortal. It will do you good for the rest of your life. So these are so many lessons to learn from the Samudra Manthan. Another thing was that there was one Asura who said, I also want to have this Amrit. He disguised himself as a Devta. He put on the garb of a Devta, and he came and stood in line. So he managed to get a little bit of the Amrit. And later on, when they found out he's had the Amrit, Lord Vishnu beheaded him. And once he was beheaded, he was sent off into space in the universe. And they say he's called Rahu and Ketu, which are some dark matter in the universe, which is inauspicious, and we all know Rahu, Ketu and astrology and what impact it has. So that one Asura is still hanging around there. He's immortal. He will be there forever, but he's a negative entity that stays around forever. So there are lots of things you will find when you go to work in companies, in organizations, or you start your own businesses. You will find there is good and bad, and all you need to do is to think it over, apply your mind, churn it up, put it in a brainstorming session in your class, in your group, and your people who are working with you, and automatically good decisions will emerge after the bad decisions have first been nullified. So there's lots of learnings from Samudra Manthan, but I will leave it over here for you right now, and move to this. So Samudra Manthan was written during the Treta Yuga, during the Sat Yuga, sorry. This is when Samudra Manthan was written. You will find references to this in almost every literature that you might read, that there is something called Samudra Manthan. And many, many times the metaphor comes up in your life also. Every time you're taking a decision, when you're going to get married, whom am I going to marry? When you're having a breakup with your boyfriend or girlfriend, whom am I? How will it? First all the anger hits you and the pain hits you, all the negative thing hits you, and the churning in your head, you can't see sense. And then later on, you feel good, okay, fine, I've healed myself, and now I'm ready to move on and find the real person for the rest of my life. So Samudra Manthan has many times as a metaphor will come back in your life. Next is when the Treta Yuga happened. So Samudra Manthan, actually, if you see many of the other mythologies like Christianity, it was when Adam and Eve, it was a Garden of Eden, everything was good. Adam and Eve, they took a bite from the apple. So that's when all evil was unleashed in the world. So also with Samudra Manthan, what happened, the vish and poison was also unleashed in the world. Till then, there was no vish and poison in the world. So it was also unleashed into the world and into society as large. So by the time the Treta Yuga happened, the poison had spread, and there was 25% of it was evil and 75% of it was good. And that's when Ramayana was written. So if you look at Ramayana, this is a little bit from the Ramayana. I've got some image here for you. And in the Ramayana, there are many things. One of the things I must also share with you at this stage is that when you go to the epics like Samudra Manthan, Ramayana, Arthashastra, Mahabharata, which are what I'm discussing with you today, you will find that for thousands of years, these were not actually physically written down. These were oral traditions. They were passed on orally. People would memorize them and they would pass on, because there was no alphabet, there was no way to write, there was no paper, or there was no leaf on which you could write, and anything that you would write on would disintegrate. There was not the way we've got documentation today. So even in Ramayana, there are many versions. There's so many versions of Ramayana, so many versions written in different languages, and there's no one authentic version. They're saying that Hanuman wrote a Ramayana version of Ramayana also after the war was fought, and Valmiki wrote a version of the Ramayana. They say Hanuman's version of Ramayana was a better version, but Hanuman did not want to compete with Valmiki. He had a lot of devotion and a lot of respect for Valmiki. So he says, no, I will not release my Ramayana. He ate it up and he destroyed it, So these are a lot of stories interesting stories you will come across, with regard to the epics. So, but by and large, Ramayana is a good written text today because of Valmiki who wrote it, who wrote that version. There are many other versions also written equally well, but this is considered the most authoritative. There was actually some incident that happened. There were actually people who lived, and there were actually stories that happened. It was called, Valmiki's version is called Ramcharit Manas. Okay, Ramcharit Manas means Ram ka charitra. Charitra is character, and Manas means human. So what is an ideal charitra? What is an ideal character? Person who's so virtuous, a person who has been completely right in every decision he made. So if you read the story, and many of you might read short versions in Amar Chitra Katha, or you might read a longer version in a book that might be written in English. Some of you might go and watch the TV serial, which was made, but that TV serial is very old one. So it was made in, I think, 80s. In 1980s, so it's not that like the modern Mahabharata TV serial is much better in the way it is written and in the way it is the cinematography is. So even if you watch it on the TV serial, it's fine. Even if you read a shorter version, it's fine. You don't have to go to the original text and read, but as long as you derive lessons. The biggest lesson for you in leadership, in management, in working life, in your grihasthashram, as you go forward to live in your family spaces, in the roles you occupy, is that what are the right decisions that you can take in every situation you can encounter. You can always go back to Ramayana to see what did Ram do, because that epic is so big. What is an epic? An epic is massive volume. When you say epic proportion, that means it's massively written. They say Mahabharata is the biggest epic in the world ever written so far. And Ramayana is, I think, the second biggest epic ever written in the world so far in terms of its size. But an epic also consists of many shorter stories embedded inside. So in Mahabharata, there are many shorter stories which are telling you different characters and different incidents that happen, and there's a larger theme to it. So, what are some of the modern day epics? Many of you must have seen Harry Potter. Harry Potter is one of the modern day epics. There are so many little stories, but there's a larger theme to it all, and a bigger theme to it. So epics are something that. So in Ramayana, there are so many situations that Ram encounters. Lots of situations he encounters. And in all the situations that he encounters, you will find there is some learning for you. So whatever decisions you take, you go back to read the story, you will find there is an answer for you. There's a guidance for you. Because in the Treta Yuga, remember this came in the Treta Yuga, evil had started becoming bigger and bigger in society. And you needed guidance. And Lord Vishnu came down in the form of Lord Ram, who gave guidance to the rest of the world. And the writing of his story was something that immortalized some of that guidance. So Ramayana is a great place to have guidance on all the moral and ethical dilemmas you will face. See, I believe all of us want to live a righteous life. None of us wants to lead a bad life. Each one of us wants to lead a life which is good and harmonious and righteous and in harmony with other people. Ramayana will teach you what is right and what is wrong. Another thing that Ramayana will do is it will tell you what your roles are about. So as a man, you will have many roles. You will be a son, so it will tell you what an ideal son is about. You will be a brother, it will tell you what an ideal brother is about, because you'll see Lakshman and Bharat were ideal brothers. You will see, what ideal wife is about, because Sita was an ideal wife. You see ideal daughter, ideal father, all the different roles you will play in your life. When you go to work in an organization, what's an ideal worker? If you be a leader in an organization, you're a boss, what's an ideal boss? So all possible ideal roles are very easily explained in the Ramayana. So you will derive so when you read, you will derive lots and lots and lots of learning from the Ramayana on how to lead. Also, the Ramayana gives you one big faith in life, that whenever there is a battle, good will always win over evil. Good will always win over evil. That's the way Lord Vishnu designed the world. The world came from his navel in the form of a lotus, and there was lots of stories on that also. But that's the way the world was designed, that good will always be immortal, the Devtas will always be immortal. And the day evil becomes so big that there's no good left, that will be the last day of this universe. That's the day the world will end and Pralay will happen. That's the last day. So it gives you a lot of faith that good will win over evil. Now, many of you on the day of Dasera was the day, everyone knows the story basically. I'm assuming that when Ram, goes to battle and to recover Sita was abducted by Ravan, he goes to fight Ravan. So Dasera, that battle lasted for 10 days. And on the 10th day, Ravan was killed. So we all celebrate Dasera on the 10th day when Ravan was killed. I remember I have a big Maidan in front of my house. I live in Khar over here in Bandra. There's a Khar Gymkhana, big Maidan over there. And they create this big Ravan and they burn it every year. And why do we burn Ravan every year? Because every child in the neighborhood who watches that, every grandmother will tell every child the story of how good won over evil. And we celebrate that good winning over evil. When we burn that Ravan, that good has now finally won. It gives you that faith. Every child You watch Hindi movies also, you will find there will always be a hero and there will be a villain. And in the end, the villain will be vanquished and the hero will win. No matter what the story is. I have yet to see a movie in which the evil has become so big that it doesn't win. I have yet to see, including in the foreign movies. Including in the foreign movies, good always wins. Sometimes the battle is longer. I mean, you see some of the Batman movies, with the Joker. Sometimes the Joker is so evil, but in the end, the Batman always wins. It may be a difficult struggle, but the Batman always wins. And the day good will not win, that will be the end of the world. That's the way it is designed. Don't worry, it won't happen in your and my lifetimes. That much you can be assured, that Kali Yuga will not end during my time and your time. We are still around for a lot of time here. So that's something about Ramayana. One more thing, two more lessons I want to share with you in Ramayana before we move on to the next one. The first lesson is that, why did Ravan abduct Sita? Why did he kidnap her? Okay, he was a god in himself, I mean, people, if you go to Sri Lanka and many other places, people revere him as a god. He had the blessings of all the devtas and all the gods. He was a very learned person, very righteous person. But one of the things I learned when I read the epics is that every god has clay feet. Every god. No one is perfect. No human being, no god. Every god has one clay foot, clay feet. There's a proverb which says every god has clay feet. The feet are made from clay, which means it's imperfect. So also Ravan had a clay feet. Ravan had one clay feet. While Ram and Lakshman and Sita were in exile in the forest, in the Chitrakoot forest, there was lots of stories, many stories I told you. There's one story was how Lakshman, had a battle with a person called Supnakha. She was Ravan's sister. He didn't know at that time. She came in the form of an asura, and he cut off her nose, and she was insulted. She was very insulted by the fact that her nose has been cut off. So Ravan was very angry when he learned that his sister has been insulted by Ravan and her nose has been cut off. So he swears that I will take revenge. That was Ravan's clay foot. Otherwise, he was a very good man, but that was his clay foot. That was where his Achilles heel was, his weak spot came. Because as a revenge for his sister's insult, he kidnapped Sita. He was forced to commit an evil act and kidnap another man's wife. He was forced to do that. So that is what made him evil. So revenge is nothing but an opportunity to forgive the other person. And Ravan could not do that. And that's a big learning for us. And I tell you, if you carry this one learning with you, you will live a very happy life. When someone does you wrong, and people will do you wrong, we are living in Kali Yuga all the time, people will do wrong to you. Forgive them. If you carry revenge, revenge is a Ravan which lives in your own heart. It lives in your own heart. Revenge is nothing but Ravan living in your heart. It's a destructive element. So when you're able to forgive somebody, it tells you that you are able to conquer that Ravan in your heart. That's a very powerful lesson. I hope you can carry that lesson with you. So that's a big learning from Ramayana, which I got personally. It helped me in my time. When there was Samudra Manthan happening in my head, and there were times when people did wrong to me, I discovered that the best solution is only to forgive them. They are weak in their own ways. They have their weak points. They have their clay feet. I may have my own weak points. Let them live and I'll be okay without their insult. So that's helped me achieve a lot of happiness. And I wish that if this is one lesson you take away today, that's the only lesson you need actually in life. The other thing is very beautiful part of Ramayana I loved was Hanuman's role. And the role of Hanuman was amazing to see the Shraddha, the devotion, the absolute love, total love that he had for Ram. You know, so I learned a lot from that. So many forms of devotion, so many times that devotion is challenged, so many times your love is so unconditional love. How to bring that to people and how to bring that to people you love. Tomorrow you'll get married and there'll be one argument you might have with your spouse and you'll separate and say, hey, I want a divorce. Because that's what's happening in the world today. You can't manage any one fight also with your spouse. And you've got a nice boyfriend, someone who really love, and one fight and you break up. And you're unable to find unconditionality in your love. There's so many conditions attached when you love somebody. And the whole learning from Ramayana is, how do I love somebody without any conditions attached? Because that's the purest form of love that you will find in Hanuman, how much he loved. So I'm going to leave Ramayana and move forward. I think we have roughly 10-15 minutes more. We started at 11:20, so I planned for 1 hour. So we'll see. Mahabharat. Now Mahabharat, if I go back, I go back, it was written in the Dwapar Yuga. In fact, this is the point at which, the Mahabharat, the war is about to start, and Krishna is giving a sermon to Arjuna. And that sermon turned out to be the Bhagavad Gita, was a sermon that lasted many hours. Okay, so this is written in the Dwapar Yuga when evil had become more powerful and more strong, and it resided in your family. So when Draupadi, I don't know, I hope many of you have at least some basic idea of the story. When Draupadi was the wife of the Pandavas, she was insulted by the Kauravas, and Duryodhan, she was disrobed, they tried disrobing her and in public and shaming her and humiliating her. And then the Pandavas said, no, we will ask for some revenge again comes up. And that's when the Mahabharat war came back. And it's a long story how it got to the war. They tried to avoid the war really, but it finally got to the war. And that's when wars really started happening. And till then, there was not that many wars in the world. The wars were all about good and evil, but here was a war based on revenge as well. So Mahabharat. Here is the story of Krishna, who is the charioteer for Arjuna, who are two main heroes and lovely people in this. So what is the learning from the Mahabharata? Everyone knows the story. I'm assuming the storyline of the Kauravas and the Pandavas, and they were all brothers, but for some reason, there was a lot of enmity because the mother wanted her children to assume the throne and things like that. So the biggest gift from the Mahabharata to the whole universe, this happened about 4,000 to 6,000 years ago. Again, I don't want to give a number to things because there are so many different points of view. Different scholars have different dating, and they've studied much more than I've studied. The literature, different scholars will tell you, no, Mahabharata happened at this time. Some will say it happened. Some say it didn't happen at all. It's just a mythology. And some people swear that there is evidence that it happened. And there are many places you will find evidence where it actually happened. And there were many stories and incidents, and you'll find remnants of that. Now they're claiming that even the bridge, that Ram built in the Ramayana, the bridge that he built from Kanyakumari in India to Sri Lanka, that there is still a link over there which is underground, which is called Ram Setu. Anyway, so they're finding evidences now more and more of some of these stories which existed 10,000 years ago in the case of Ramayana, and about 4,000 to 6,000 years ago in the case of Mahabharata. So the story everybody knows of Mahabharata. There are many, many stories. Watch the serial, guys. It's really compelling to watch the serial, over here. And watch either of the serials. There are two serials that were made on Mahabharata. One was the Star Plus serial and one was made before that. Watch either of the two. Both are equally good. I will not say one is bad and one is good. Watch either of them. So there's again, the Mahabharata has more human characters. As in, Ramayana had the ideal human characters, which perhaps nobody can be ideal. But the Mahabharata had characters which had their own humanness, some good qualities, some bad qualities, some doubts, some different identity patterns. So in Ramayana, I will say it was all role, no self. Only roles represented the ideal roles of father, son, brother, mother, and all that. In Mahabharata, it is different identities of people. What is my individual, unique personality? And you will find, if you study the characters of all the Mahabharata characters, you will find there's someone who is very similar to you in there also. Similar identity patterns will come up. So Mahabharata is a great place to understand human nature as it is. The Ramayana is a great place to understand ideal roles in society, but the Mahabharata is a great place to understand human nature as it is. Because you will find every character is different, has different dharma, has different karma, has different journey, has different learnings, and has different ways in which their lives ended and how they, the karmic baggage was executed and how they, And if you watch the Star Plus version of Mahabharata, you'll find that there's always a little, at the end of every episode, there is a little narrative that Lord Krishna gives, which tells you the story and analyzes the story and analyzes the characters for you. So that's also very interesting to learn all the different identity patterns that were possible are all represented in the Mahabharata. So you'll find someone who has a similar tendencies like you there. And you'll find you can identify that I am like Arjun, or I am like Duryodhan, or I am like so-and-so. You can identify with the characters. So that is why I remember when my own son was born and my, and his grandmother, that's my mother, she was holding him in the arms. And she was saying, Are, they tell the child when they're born, you should, Arjun ke jaise veer bano, so you are, so they tell you, they give the blessing that may you be as brave as Arjun is, or may you be, so they give the blessings also, from deriving from identities in the Mahabharata, because Mahabharata is more human. It's all self, no roles. There are some role orientations there, because everyone acts according to their inner dharma. What is your inner dharma? Dharma has many meanings. The word, it has 16, 17 different meanings. But in this context, what is your purpose in life? Many of you will find on the traffic lines, crossings, you will find there's a book that's coming out, Ikigai. What is your Ikigai? So what is your dharma? What is the purpose with which your soul has come onto this planet in this life? What is the lesson that you need to learn? What are the experiences you need to have? And how you need to learn from that so that your soul can evolve. Anyway, that's another line of thinking. But the biggest gift from the Mahabharata is the Bhagavad Gita. It is a guide for everyday living. Everyday living. If you cannot have access or don't want to listen to the original version, just get an abridged version and make that like a manual for yourself. You'll find a lot of guidance. It's very, tells you lots of things. It, especially when you're in a negative situation and you're feeling the world is all screwed up and things are not happening for me and life is not working out and it's not working well for me today. I'm feeling all messed up inside. And when you feel like that, when you read that, at least the Gita Sar, which is whatever is happening is good. Jo ho raha hai, acha hi ho raha hai. Whatever happened so far has been good, because if all that hadn't happened, we wouldn't have been here. So whatever happened has been good. Jo hua tha, wo bhi acha hai. जो आगे होगा वो भी अच्छा ही होगा. Everything is for the greater good. It gives you a reason to stay optimistic, because it doesn't matter if you're feeling lousy, but everything that's happening is for a greater good. And that's a faith which I learned early on and I carried. And that's what helped me get past my negative moments. जो हो रहा है अच्छा ही हो रहा है. It's for a larger good. It's not feeling right now, I know, but it will pass and it'll be for a greater good. And when you look back in your life, some of your worst moments were the moments where you learned the most. And the moments where you learn how to retain your faith and keep your hope alive and not lose hope. So that's the biggest learning. There are many thousands, millions, uncountable learnings in the Mahabharata and Ramayana, but I'm just giving you some gist. Then it tells you a lot about the art of war. Now, if you're going to work in, or you're going to do an MBA and then you're going to go in organizations, you will learn things like business strategy as a subject, marketing strategy, how to make yourself number one in the business. How do you, create a good brand image for yourself? How do you create, you've got to beat your competition and emerge better. So now business strategy is nothing but the Mahabharata, and much better explained. Rather than, you go to Potter's 5 forces model, it sounds so inane when you study the Mahabharata, it sounds very inane. Or you'll study a McKinsey 7S model, or you'll study a blue ocean strategy, or you'll study, many of you are commerce students, you might have studied some of this. But when you study the Mahabharata, it tells you so much more. So during the war, which lasted 18 days, there was battle strategy discussions every night. At night, they would get together, no matter how tired they were, they would discuss what's going to be a strategy for the next day. And if you watch the serial, you will understand a lot about business strategy there. How you plan to win and to succeed in the next level, in the next stage. So they have battle formations, they're called views. What is the view? What is the Chakra view was one of the views, a very powerful battle formation so that the enemy comes and then gets vanquished and conquered, because simply the formation was such. Their battle formations, and learning about when winning is right, when winning is wrong, when it's things that were so far not considered ethical now started becoming ethical. So for example, at one stage, Krishna advised, let's leave the battlefield. We are not going to win it like this current situation is. That's why one of the names of Krishna is Ran Chhod. Run means the battlefield. Chhod means he ran away. In the past, it was considered to be an act of cowardice when you're leaving the battlefield. But Krishna advised, now is the moment. If you really want to win the longer war, this particular battle is better to leave. So you keep the strategy is the bigger war, and the smaller battles you have to plan also. So a lot about winning against competition, how to beat the competition, how to be better than them. And it also tells you about greed. Everybody at every stage, other than a few of them, were given to greed. It tells you about the consequences of revenge, consequences of greed, consequences of moh and maya, and consequences of, so even Gandhari, who was blindfolded, she was so, and Duryodhan, who was blind, Dhritarashtra, who was blind, their sons were the 100 Kauravas. They were so blind in the faith and their love for their children. Itna moh, putra moh, that they lost sight of the fact that they were kings and they were responsible to society and not to their own children. So they became very possessive, and so they tells you about greed. It tells you moh maya ke bandhan, and it tells you how to tells you also that how attaching yourself to these things that give you, that cause for greed will never meet a good end. And in the end, it is the detachment that works. And that's the whole lesson of the Bhagavad Gita also, which and the only attachment is to the dharma that you have to do, the good karma and the dharma that you are here for. That's the only attachment that is needed. All other attachments are all not going to contribute to your happiness. It also tells you about something about, for the first time, it is women's pride as an important factor. Draupadi was badly insulted. And her 5 husbands, who were the Pandavas, they could not tolerate her insult, although they had a role to play in her insult by losing the game of Chaucer, but they could not tolerate the insult, and they said, we will go to battle to fight for your pride. All right, so pride, women, till now, women were subservient, a lot of them were subservient, or if they didn't get their way, they just left, like Sita, when she didn't get her way, she just left and lived a separate life, bringing up her children. But till now, no woman had fought back for her pride. Or women were never fighting anyway in those days, but this was a battle that was fought because of a woman's pride needed to be restored. So it tells you a lot about the now where we are today. We are respecting women more and more, and it started over there. It also tells you about, something, I don't know how many of you know the story in the Mahabharata about Abhimanyu. Abhimanyu was a son of Arjun, very darling son of Arjun, very much loved son of Arjun. And he learned about the Chakravyuh, because Arjun and all were discussing the Chakravyuh as a formation, as a battle formation, when he was in his mother's womb. And he was in his mother's womb when he was learning about, they were talking about the Chakravyuh. And there's only one person who knew the secret of how to break the Chakravyuh and emerge from it successfully. And that was Arjun. He had been given that as a gift. And when Arjun was discussing this, Abhimanyu was in his mother's womb. His mother fell asleep halfway through. So he knew that there is something called a Chakravyuh. He knew how to get into it. He knew how to get to the center of it, but he did not learn how to get out of it. And when the battle actually happened, one of the strategies of the Kauravas was they took Arjun and they diverted his attention and they took him far away from the battlefield. So he was like on a decoy, on a wild goose chase. He went off far away from the battlefield. And they formed the Chakravyuh to trap Abhimanyu. So the Kauravas formed this Chakravyuh. Abhimanyu went inside, and eventually, after a lot of battle, very sadly lost his life because he did not know how to get out of the Chakravyuh. He fell into the trap. He thought he knew, but he didn't know. So the moral of the story is half knowledge. The moral of the story is half knowledge is a sure shot failure. Unless you know fully, you should not enter any field, not enter any competition, not enter any, unless you're fully confident that you know it all, at least as much as is required to know. You'll never have 100% knowledge, but at least what is required to be known for that particular problem, that particular challenge. So learning is very important part in your success. Half learning doesn't get you anywhere. And I will move to the last one, which is the Arthashastra. Now, again, if I was to go back to, my timeline, this is my timeline. It was at the beginning of Kali Yuga. It was at the beginning of Kali Yuga, and the evil had started becoming more and more in the world, in the universe. And at the beginning of Kali Yuga, when Arthashastra was written, I have a copy over here. It's one of the most authoritative copies of the Arthashastra. It was written, and this was I'll tell you the story about it. But it was written at a time when evil was approaching 3/4 of society, and the universe was becoming more and more evil. So Arthashastra was written at that time. I'll tell you a little bit about the context. This person you see here, he's a Brahmin, and his name is Kautilya, Chanakya, Vishnugupta, different names he's known by. Some say he was one person, some say it was more than one person, but we don't know for sure. But we assume it was one person because that seems to be the most authoritative. He was a teacher, a professor, like most Brahmins were teachers and gurus and professors. And he was a teacher and a professor. And you must have heard of a great king called Chandragupta Maurya, who was one of the bravest kings in the world had seen up to this point. One of the great kings. And Chandragupta Maurya was very young when he came to ascend the throne. The other thing was Chandragupta Maurya was not a Kshatriya. All kings up to this stage had been Kshatriyas. They were warriors. They were fighters. They understood battle. They understood power. They understood position. They understood what it means to be a king, and they understood how to be hold on to that power and discharge that responsibility. But Chandragupta Maurya came from the trader community, from the Vaishya classes. He came from trader community. So he was not born into a Kshatriya tradition or a Kshatriya dharma. And when he became a king, he did not understand power. He did not understand politics. He could do good trading. He could do good business because that's what he knew, but he did not understand. So he sought mentorship of Chanakya to advise him and guide him and give him a lot of consultancy on how to rule like a Kshatriya king would, So that's how the relationship between Chanakya and Chandragupta Maurya was formed. And Chandragupta Maurya was being a professor and a teacher and a guru. There were, all the universities, the Nalanda and all the other so many different Magad universities, Nalanda universities in those days. India was one of the countries which has the oldest universities for education also. So he was one of the well-recognized professors, but he was also very sharp in his thinking and very analytical in his approach, So he advised Chandragupta Maurya on many occasions he was literally by his side all the time, giving him advice on what he should do and what he should not do. If you watch the TV serial, you will learn a lot, because this is where management processes started coming in. Till now, there was no such thing as, must have been, but it was loosely held. There must have been something, but this is the first time it was one of the best administered kingdoms, best managed kingdoms. And if I would say best managed organizations, I will say that too. As an organization, it is the best managed and most efficiently run and most one of the greatest kings that ever lived was Chandragupta Maurya. And he could not have been any of that without Chanakya, who is also known as Kautilya and also known as Vishnugupta. So in his lifetime, a lot of the practical things that got done, he also wrote in the form of textbooks. This is when writing had already started by now. It was not an oral tradition, it was written down. And he wrote many books, many things. He wrote Chanakya Niti, and he wrote this Arth Shastra, which is, Arth means economy. So it's like a book on economy, economics textbook. It's a management textbook, according to me. So he wrote a lot of books, but this was the most famous book, was the Arth Shastra, which today people are quoting hugely. Many of you might, as commerce students, might take a subject on management, introduction to management. I don't know what is your textbook these days, but there is Stephen Robbins and so many other textbooks are there. Indian textbooks are there also. Introduction to management, it says. You can shelve that or keep it for the exams, but you must read this one. This is the real introduction to management. It's the best introduction to management you'll ever find. Okay. I can tell you everything. It contains job descriptions. It contains job descriptions of chief protector of animals and controller of animal slaughter. And if you read this job description, you'll know that even in India today, we have people who are like wildlife in the government, people in charge of wildlife, and then there's animal slaughter also, where their animals are being slaughtered. That has got governance and policy attached. The same governance and policy is here, and it's better written here. It's better written over here than it is in our modern day government. If you look at job descriptions, you look at policies, how money is to be minted, coins are to be minted. Those days it was all coins, how they are to be minted, who's in charge of minting them. No illegal minting is allowed. If you look at what is a wise king, it's called Raj Rishi. Raj kam Rishi is a person who's wise. A Rishi is a person who's wise. So Raj Rishi, how a wisdom has to be combined with the kingdom, not someone who's power hungry and politically correct. So wisdom is an important part of king. It can tell you stories about, battle strategy, because, and one of the famous things that he said, for which he became very notorious, and he was much maligned because of this few things that he said. It was that, if you have any country anywhere, all the neighboring countries, you must consider them your enemy. So don't make friends with your neighbors. They're all your enemies, because if you make friends with your neighbors, they will invade you. It was a different time, but that's one of his lessons, because of which he became very notorious. And then he said, any enemy's enemy is your friend. So your friendship is not based upon real friendship, real connection, emotional connection. Your friendship is nothing but a political alliance. So if you have enemies, they're your friend. Now you look at India today, we are surrounded by enemies, mostly. China, Pakistan, Bangladesh is not so much an enemy, but they're not very friendly with us either. So most countries you will find, any country will see which is landlocked, you'll find they're surrounded by enemies. So in some ways he was right, practically speaking, but in some ways he was too blunt also. He was known to be very blunt. In some ways he was known to have no soft feelings or soft corners of any kind. So sometimes, you see his face over here. I found the best picture I could find of him, the most positive picture I found of him, I put it here. Otherwise, in most cases, he was also physically very ugly person. That's what they say, because, everyone likes to make some villains. But I found the best picture of him and I put it here. The picture where he's not looking too ugly. He's looking very sharp. He's looking very strong. He's looking very, intellectual, which is all that he was. So this tells you, is a manual for management and governance. It tells you right from wrong. One of the things that I learned from watching the serial on Chanakya, and also from the book, is that success is not an accident. Success is not an accident. And that's why Chandragupta Maurya was a success, because his teacher Chanakya advised him to be planning each step of the way, not just acting on an impulse. I will do the good things and my success will happen. No, we have to aim for success and then only make it happen. So you begin with the end in mind. So one of the biggest lessons from Chanakya is success is not an accident. It has to be made to happen. It has to be planned for. You have to take action steps. You have to make course corrections. You have to make sure that you're doing every action that you take is oriented towards your success, whether your gut tells you differently or not. So success is not an accident, and winning has to be created. Another thing it tells you here, and one of the biggest qualities of the king, and one of the reasons why Chandragupta Maurya had a very good and successful reign, one of the greatest kings the world has seen, apparently, that's how they call him, even historians write about him that way, was that a king has to be of service to his subjects. So you have to listen to your people and you have to deliver what they want. Not say, I'm going to be like this. In Mahabharata, you'll find Dhritarashtra was always doing his manmani, his marzi, his whatever he wanted to do. He never listened to his subjects. That's why he was increasing discontent. Many of the kings who have unhappy subjects, they find there's a lot of discontent because no one listens to them. So they're not contented, they're not happy. One of the biggest lessons and reasons for Chandragupta Maurya was that he listened to his people. So listening to your employees, listening to your people, listening to people who are serving you is the best way to serve them. So you're not just a leader, you're a leader in service. Today you'll learn lessons in management saying leader is a stewardship in stewardships, or the leader is a coach, or the leader is, these are all written down here. You don't necessarily have to do an MBA to understand what good leadership is about. So that is something that I learned a lot from, that a leader exists to serve his people. He doesn't exist for himself alone. And one more lesson I learned from the Arthashastra is that this was the time during the Dwapar Yuga when there was half evil and half good. And one of the things that was what started happening, because so far there was war, and war was fought on the basis of skill, on the basis of skill and competence and weaponry and strategy. But for the first time, the war started happening on the basis of psychological warfare. There was psychological warfare happened. That, what one thing we say, jo dar gaya, wo mar gaya. So the idea is to make the other person feel scared and so fearful that he dies, or that he gives up, or that he loses. It was not because of your skill, not because of your competence, not because of your capability. It's a psychological warfare. So Chanakya specialized in psychological warfare also. So that's one of the learnings. Today also, if you see today, if Neeraj Chopra has won, it's because psychologically he was very strong. He's won a gold medal because psychologically he had a winning mindset. When he went out there, he knew he had all the confidence. And the role of a coach is to give you that confidence. The role of a coach is to give you that confidence. Every person needs a coach and a guru. Every person. There was one athlete from India who did not have a coach. There was one athlete from India who did not have a coach. And that was the lady who played golf, Anjali. At the Olympics, she did not have a coach. And if you see the interview with Anjali when she came back from there, she came fourth. Although her game was as good as a gold medal. But she was there without a coach. No one to give her the motivation, no one to tell her right from wrong. And she was only cribbing all the time. She was cribbing all the time complaining. My hotel is 1.5 hours drive away from the golf course where the competition is. And I need to wake up and I need 1 hour of warm-up exercises and I need to wake up and have my breakfast, etc. So I had to get up at 2:30 to be able to be on the golf course by 9 o'clock when my match is starting. She was cribbing. If she had a coach, she may have come back with a medal because her capability and her skills were excellent. Her skill was equivalent to the gold medalist. But if you see her quotation, she's never had a coach. She's a self-made person. That's when the ego comes in. And that's what is exactly the hallmark of the Kali Yuga. People will be with egos. But you see, Neeraj is so humble. He's got no ego. He's got no ego. He listens to his coach. He's a very humble guy. Yet he's confident. Whereas when a person is without guidance or without any anchoring, there is ego that comes in. So one of the learnings from Arthashastra is how to vanquish your ego and build your confidence. And you'll find that is a theme in in Mahabharata also, when you look at the gurus, what they instill in their shishyas is always confidence. You rely on your own senses, rely on your own judgment. Don't go by necessarily what is written down as a procedure. Go by your judgment and take your decision by whatever your judgment tells you. So that's something that I learned from the Arthashastra. Before I close, I want to leave you some things I learned in my life from my encounters with the epics, some fundas I gathered. The story I told you today was from the 4 yugs, and I took one episode from each of the yugs. And I brought that to you. And there are many personal lessons also more, which I wish I had time to share with you. But there will be, each one of you will be on your own path to greater learning, to higher. In fact, I should have used higher learning instead of great learning. I made this slide only just in the morning today. So put yourself on the path to higher learning. Don't just learn only from books and experiences. Learn from your teachers. Learn from people who come to give you lectures. They are successful in their own way. Don't sit in the back seat and say, oh, these guys are useless. I'm better than them. No, I can do better than these guys. No, everyone is successful in their own way. They may not speak the right words in the way you want them spoken. They may not tell you what you want to listen to. But they're all successful in their own way. Each one's on their own path. So put yourself on the path to learning. Learn from others. Learn from the epics. Watch these serials instead of watching Netflix, empty stuff coming on Netflix. You learn nothing. In the middle of the night, I spent one night watching that Family Man episode, only violence, killing. And I was sleeping with images of violence in my head, And when you watch say a Vishnu Puran, all these serials are available, if you search for them, YouTube and so many places they're available. DD archives, they're available. Learn, watch these serials. They're equally gripping, they're equally exciting, they're equally interesting. And join groups which discusses stories and learns from those stories. Form your own opinion. Don't have to accept my opinion. I've told you one story there. I tell you, the ancient literature is so vast. It's so huge. And I've told you only one small fragment of it, what I've shared with you. Don't deny yourself the opportunity to dive deep, take a deep dive. And you don't have to devote your whole life to learning the epics unless you want to. I didn't do that, but yet I learned a lot from them. So I would love to see each one of you on the path to your own learning. And that's what is the best that I can leave you with. There's a very nice book I came across, and this lady was I listened to her lecture also. She's a Gen Z person. She's like you. She's your age. Yet she's so knowledgeable, and yet she's a pleasure. You follow her on Instagram. I think all of you just follow her. She'll be dancing, singing joyfully, and then 1 minute she'll be very seriously telling you some great gyan that she'll be speaking your language. She won't be speaking my language. My language is different. Her name is Sahara Rose. She's written a lovely book called Discover Your Dharma. And there are many books, but this one is targeted at Gen Z, which is targeted at you, which will speak your language, talk to you. And if you can read this book, by all means, please do buy it and read it. And there's lots of exercises in there that might give you some guidance in what is your dharma. I would love you to discover your own dharma. Your dharma is your purpose in life. What gives you meaning in life. And each one, believe me, comes. I believe in reincarnation. I believe that, as per Indian epics and mythology, you have been through 84 lakh births and deaths as different forms of life. It's only after 84 lakh births and deaths that you assume a human form. So you assume a human form. And once you assume a human form, whatever acts you commit, whatever karma you do will determine your next life. If you're non-human, there's no chance of doing any karma. As a non-human, you don't have karma. You don't have a free will. You cannot choose. You cannot make a choice. You don't have any will. But once you become human, you're granted free will. And after 84 lakhs of births, you become a human. And you've got now right to make choices. You can make choices. You can use your brain to make choices. This cerebral cortex does not exist in most other animals. And your soul comes down for a purpose on this earth, on this planet. And that is your dharma. And there's a beautiful guide to finding your purpose. It's very nice. It's written in your language. Please read it if you can. This is the only book I'm asking you to read. Otherwise, listen to her lectures. She's on YouTube, plenty of stuff on YouTube that will give you a lot of inputs as well. So I want to say thank you to Dr. Rupal Shroff and to Dr. Rakhi Pathak and to the principal of Thakur College and all the management and all of you lovely students. I can see there were at one stage almost 260 people or plus who were attending. Now they're 181, which is fine. Drop-off rate has not been too much. So thank you so much for attending today and giving me the chance to bring this to you. Please take a screenshot of my contact details should you need it. And I will now close this.
Thank you so much, Dr. Anita Modak ma'am, for such enlightening and engaging session today. I would now like to invite Dr. Parul Singhal ma'am, a Dean Commerce, to speak a few words.
Thank you, Marishi. Anita ma'am, thank you so much for such a beautiful, inspiring, and a very nostalgic journey of an hour or so. Nostalgic because I was just remembering my childhood days. Am I audible, guys?
Yes, yes.
Thank you, ma'am. I was just remembering my childhood days when I used to sit on my grandmother's lap and listen to all the amazing stories of the Ram and the Ravan, the Krishna and the Kansa and all the other Vishnu avatars. And my the love for the stories just resulted in convincing me. And I always used to tell my parents that I want to have the latest version of the Amar Chitra Katha, because that made me feel very elated and, in grasp of the Hindu mythology. I considered myself to be the expert reading all of that. While I was listening to this session, I was remembering the lessons it has taught me. And thankfully, you have reinforced all of these through the stories, the examples, and the characters that you wove around in that last 1 hour. Because these epics are not just books. They are the way we think as a community and the way we function. And if I could just take, guys, 30, 40 seconds more, I just wanted to reiterate and sum up what ma'am has said from my own findings, what I have generated over a period of time. The first one is obviously what ma'am has already spoken about, as it teaches us about the good and the evil. So in the most mythology, whether you talk about the Samudra Manthan or you talk about the goddess Kali killing the demon Raktabij, the message is the same, that the good triumphs over evil. So never forget that. The second is that it unlocks your imagination. So you have the flying chariots, you have part human, part animal creatures, multiple incarnations, and nothing just seems impossible. Then it also encourages a lot of curiosity. If you've read the stories of Krishna and all, whether it talks about the story of retrieving a ball from the lake, or he wandering, or doing some kind of naughty stuff with the gopis and all, it's all homage to the benefit of the curiosity. It also teaches us respect towards women. And ma'am, at the end of the session, also spoke about Arthashastra, the management lessons, the important lessons that Kautilya has given to us. Now, if you actually see these, all these lessons have a relevance in today's society, probably not in the Dwapar Yuga or the Treta Yuga that ma'am was talking about, but yes, in Kali Yuga, I think these lessons do have a lot of impact and practical nuances. So thank you so much, ma'am, for sparing the valuable time, coming here and sharing such information and these tales, because time and out, we just tend to forget them. But as you came, you made us remember. So it reinstilled the faith that these epics, these stories are what are part of us, and they make us so proud of our nation and our heritage. Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Parul.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, Parul. It was very nice word that you have said. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Parul ma'am. And I would personally like to share that the session has not only been restricted to management skills, but also you shared and taught us so much about personality in general, how to actually behave and how we can go back to our ethics and make decisions. And in life, how everything is going to be good and bad, but then you have to really brainstorm, and the toxic things will at the end just go and it's going to be all good. Each you guys, you thought so much, like we had so many lessons from each you guys. So thank you so much for sharing and spending your valuable time with us. And
Thank you very
also
much,
an important
Mercy.
announcement. Also, I would like everyone to kindly share and just feel the feedback form, because it is very crucial for us. And now I would really like to request Mr. Pranav Dutt Bora to come in for the official vote of thanks.
Thank you very much for the Mr. Pranav Dutt Bora.
It's Pranav to say, am I audible, Maharshi and the others?
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
To capture this epic, just to capture this epic fundas, and more importantly, to capture this epic moment today, after the vote of thanks by Pranav, we have the national anthem that will be played out with the permission of Dr. Anita ma'am, just to capture this moment with us today. So we request everybody after the vote of thanks to please keep your video on and we play the audio. Please everybody join us for the national anthem post Pranav's vote of thanks. Thank you, everyone. Pranav, you may.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much, Mercy, for the tag of Mr. I, Pranav Dutt Bora, on behalf of the management team who has managed this inter-collegiate webinar, would like to propose a vote of thanks. We all are inspired through provoking words. I would like also to thank management at TCS, our beloved principal, ma'am, Dr. C.T. Chakravarti, for having such platform and conducted this webinar. I would also like to extend my heartfelt thanks to Dr. Parul Singhal ma'am, Dean Commerce, also the faculty members at TCS who have joined today, and Dr. Rupal Shroff ma'am, the coordinate BMS department, for guiding and inspiring us for conducting this great session. I know that it is a virtual session, but an event like this cannot happen overnight. It required a rolling weeks, a walk, and it required not being to be overnight in painting. It required planning and an eagle eye to look upon it. So we'll look upon and the direction which has been gained to that. So looking forward for cooperation in the future events. Thank you very much and have a good day all.
Anita ma'am, a very big thank you today. I mean, it was such a different session than what we usually do with introduction to management. Rather than talking about managerial roles and the skills they require, this was a very, very enlightening session. I'm so glad to connect to you again, and I hope that we can have many such sessions with you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can we play the national anthem now?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Can I please request
Yes, ma'am.
everybody to switch on their videos, guys?
Not audible,
No.
Advait. We'll be in the sitting position so that,
Can you play it, Advait?
Yes, ma'am.
when you select that, please share the sound there on the extreme left side button. Stop sharing right now for a second, please. Stop share. Yeah, go to share screen, and before you select that, there's a left side share sound. Kindly do that first.
And make it stereo, not mono.
I think the video clip has not started, Rakhi. Have you started?
No.
Advait, are we ready?
अधिनायक जय हे भारत भाग्य आशीष मांगे गाहे तव जय गाथा जन गण मंगलदायक जय हे भारत भाग्य विधाता जय हे जय हे जय हे जय 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 हे
Thank you so much, everyone. Can we end, ma'am? Can we end, ma'am? Vimalsa, yeah. Vimalsa, can we please end?
Yes, ma'am, doing just right.